Hi everyone and welcome to this webinar. My name is Simone Cavago and I'm part of the marketing team here at Cyara and I'll be moderating today's event. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for this webinar with Exceed Global. Our topic for today is Good to Great CX. In this webinar, we'll be covering strategies for taking your CX to the next level. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few logistics with you. First, if you have any questions, please type them into the questions panel at any time, and we will answer them at the end of the session. Second, feel free to chat with me at any time, and I'll ensure that your comments are shared with our presenters. Lastly, this webinar will be shared online and viewable on demand. You'll receive an email with the link information so that you can watch when it suits you. And of course, we'd love to see you share your thoughts on the webinar via Twitter or other social media using the hashtag CyaraWebinar. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. First up is Isabella Villani. She is the Managing Director and Chief Customer Officer at Exceed Global. Isabella is an industry expert in customer experience, employee experience, business transformation, and omni-channel strategy. Joining Isabella is Simon Bennett, Exceed Global's Director of Consulting. He is a senior executive with 20 years experience in delivering global telecommunications and complex integration solutions to customers across multiple industries, including government, finance, energy, and construction. And our Cyara presenter today is Gautier Delmy, a domain consultant who works with Cyara's largest customers to assess and innovate CX development and monitoring capabilities and craft an immediate and long-term vision for success. Now, because we have a few new listeners in our audience today, I'd like to give a brief introduction about Cyara to give some context about what we do. We're a Melbourne, Australia-born company, and we've been around since 2006. Our omni-channel CX assurance platform helps organizations around the world measure their CX from the outside in, identify customer-facing issues, and increase quality across digital and voice channels. Finally, here is our agenda for today. First of all, we'll hear about Good to Great CX from the Exceed Global team, then move on to a discussion about CX with Gautier before wrapping up with some Q&A. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Isabella.
Thank you so much. Just a little bit about Exceed Global. We're Australia's leading privately owned CX firm. We work in various sectors, including financial services, government, utilities, insurance, and retail. We have three main areas that we focus on: research, advisory, which is our consulting arm, talent, which is our recruitment arm. A lot of the things I'll be talking today is in my book, Good to Great CX. It's available globally at bookshops. It's also available on Kindle and Amazon and iBooks if you'd like the ebook version. So anything I've discussed today is covered off further in the book, and I'm happy to answer questions along the way as well. If we think about customer experience, the most important thing is around drivers of customer experience. And when I say that, if you are going to design a customer experience, or if you're looking at CX strategy within your organisation, you need to give some thought about what is driving customers to interact with your organisation and do business with you. And when they do business with you, what is their expectation of that experience? So the first thing I'll talk about is ease. Now, this looks like a little bit of a honeycomb, and maybe it's because I like food, but I'll go through all of these in a little bit of detail, starting with ease, which is the image to the left in grey. Now, if you're looking at measuring customer satisfaction, that is one thing, and we know that it isn't generally a metric of success, but if you ask me what was the most important metric that you are going to use within customer experience, I would easily say ease. How easy is it for your customers to do business with you? That is what's going to drive them to join you easily, and that's what's going to drive them to stay. So customer satisfaction is one thing, but our customers may be satisfied, but if you don't make it easy, they may not hang around, and the data shows that as well. The next thing I'll talk about is being social, which is to the right of ease in blue. Now, we think about us as humans. We are still social beings, but what we're going to think about is how does what does that mean for us as organisations when we're interacting with our customers? And that is, when we're social, we want to be social, we want to be relaxed. That's the environment in which our customers are, relaxing, enjoying, and actually doing what they want to do. So therefore, in a social platform, it's really important to make sure your information is really relevant to them. You're not pushing products and services around them, but you're providing them with advice and tips to make their life better or to promote your services in a way that is meaningful for them. Then below that is around self-care. Now, self-care is around self-service. Now, surprisingly enough, and I know that a lot of data shows that people want to interact with humans, but at the same time, people like to do things for themselves. They like to be able to self-serve in multiple channels or any channel that is their preference. So again, if you make it easy, which is what I've discussed to the left, they'll often be happy to self-serve. Having said that, you need to make it easy when they're self-serving, that if they want to speak to someone or chat to someone about it on a different platform, that they can easily get transferred to a human being to either address a new inquiry or complete an inquiry that they may be struggling with to do on their own. The next topic I want to talk about is personalisation. Now, customers are waking up to the fact that we have a lot of data about them. And now they're starting to demand, well, if you know who I am, interact with me in a way that it makes it clear that you do. Not only personalise my customer experience, but individualise it. Factor in who I am, how I like to interact with you, and why it is that I'm probably contacting you. So know me and make sure that you make it clear that you know me. And you don't ask me a whole heap of questions that you already know the answers to, particularly if you're asking it again and again and again in one interaction. To the right of personalisation is mobility. Now, mobility, you automatically go to yes, mobile devices. I want to talk a little bit about mobility in general. Now, mobility, we have mobile devices, so think about that in the sense of how customers are interacting with you on that mobile device, whether it is over the phone or in that channel, or whether it is on a digital or a mobile app. But they are mobile. But the other thing that's really important about mobility is if they're mobile, you don't have 100% of their attention. They're either cooking dinner, taking the kids to school, on their way to the gym, whatever it might be. They're mobile beings. Therefore, you do not have 100% of their attention. So think about that when you're interacting with them in this mobile channel, around what can you do to make it easy for them to chat with you or talk to you on the run. So can you then offer that you'll send some information afterwards or refer them to a website or send them a text or something to confirm what you've discussed? So don't think you've got their 100% attention, and therefore make it really easy for them and simple for them to understand what you're saying to them while they're on the go. Then below mobility in the green is timeliness. Now, we're all getting really impatient, we're all getting really busy, but timeliness is around what is important to them or what information or what interaction makes sense to them and in a timely manner. Now, we can all talk about wait times, whether we're waiting in a queue in a store or waiting on hold on a phone channel. Perception is people's reality, and we talk about time warping when we're addressing this with our clients. But, you've all been in that situation where you've been on hold for 30 seconds, but it feels like 5 minutes. So how can we provide information in a timely way and that we feel that customers are being respected and that their time is important, so we're working within those boundaries. To the right of timeliness in the red is consistency. Now, in the book, I talk about omni-channel being a consistent and seamless customer experience across multiple channels and touch points. And yep, that is a quote from my book because I didn't get a ghost writer writing my book, so I pretty much remember every sentence in that book. But when we talk about consistency, we think about that consistent experience across those channels and touch points. And we've all been there as customers where we've been told something over the phone, the person sounded a bit itchy and scratchy, not that confident about what they were telling you, or it didn't seem right. So you've either hung up the phone and called back, or you've jumped online to check, or you've asked them to send some more information. But it's really important that they have that consistent customer experience. And that consistent customer experience therefore then links to ease, which I spoke about earlier. To the right and above of consistency is empowerment in light blue. When we think about empowerment, Customers now want to feel educated. They want to feel informed. They want to feel like they're in control of their banking. They're in control of their life. Therefore, they want to make decisions that are informed and that they feel like you have their best interests at heart and that you understand them and what their needs are. So empowering customers is extremely important. Below empowerment is complaints. Now, we all talk about complaints, and I want to flip that word to feedback. And I want to remind you all that feedback is a gift. If a customer is complaining, they're complaining because they want change, they want to see a difference. And sometimes they're also doing that so they're confident that you are listening to them, because remember, they want to feel empowered and they want to feel heard. That you are listening to them, that not only are you going to fix the problem, but you're going to fix that process or wherever it is that it causes that problem so other customers don't go through that experience again, and neither do they. So when they complain, they want to be heard. And we've heard this a million times before. If you can make customers feel heard and you handle a complaint well, they're usually your most loyal customers. You can really change them around. So don't forget that complaints or feedback is a gift. And the last driver I want to talk about is empathy. Now, at Exceed Global, we do a lot around training. So we do soft skills training. Now, when you think about training in, soft skills in general, empathy in general, one thing I can share with you is, and this is in data as well, you cannot fake it. So customers know when you're not being empathetic with them. So it's really important that you show empathy with them, that you make sure that you understand where they are in their life cycle or life stage, and that you understand what they're going through. So you're really walking in the shoes of your customers. Now, that links through with all of those drivers into choreographed experiences. Now, I like this concept of choreography because it makes me think of a musical or a symphony or an orchestra, but really it is that seamless customer experience that flows through all of your customer channels. Now, this is really important because you've got to remember that most people, if they're shopping to buy something new, they will probably switch up to 3 to 5 channels. Now, there's data to prove this. So you want to make sure you provide that consistent customer experience, that if there is the opportunity to self-serve and for them to inquire on their own, they can. But then they can check social and check all of those other channels that you have, that it's all consistent and it's this beautiful flow like an orchestra, that everything happens and it happens for their best interest. Now, at Exceed, we talk about customer experience ecosystem, and I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And to start with, if you notice in the diagram, the center of the diagram has customers in there. And that's because in our minds, we are very, very strong-minded around, we put the customers at the center of everything you do. And I spoke about earlier about walking in the shoes of your customers. And the first way you can start to do that is if you think about above customers with the concept of customer journey maps or other service design elements, that you actually design the customer experience. Now, when I say designing customer experience, your customers are going to have a perceived customer experience about your organization. So what I ask you to do is to make that experience extremely considered, that you've thought about it, you've walked in the shoes of your customers, and you've actually created the customer experience that you want them to have. So doing that, you have your customer journey maps, and once you've agreed on all of those, you think about optimized and mapped processes. Now, I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute here because I see this happen too many times. Processes are very, very different to customer journey maps. Customer journey maps is actually from the customer's perspective, what's going to go on in your organization or what's going to be their experience from their perspective. It talks about what emotions they're having. It talks about moments of truth, and this is covered in a whole chapter in the book. But if you think about moments of truth, at what point in that journey for them is actually make or break or really, really important to them. That's when we talk about moments of truth. So if you look at then you're leveraging these journey maps to then go, right, to deliver on this great customer experience, let's optimize and map our processes internally and look at what is the process like, what systems are accessed at which point, and make it very, very clear to have these processes documented and communicated within the business. And that aligns to the drivers as well. You really can't have a consistent customer experience if you haven't documented your processes and have that level of consistency and ease as well around optimizing it. So when you're looking at a customer journey, ask yourself in your process mapping, are we making this overly difficult for our customers to do business with us with these processes? And constantly question yourself. And then if you've got these lovely mapped processes, you think about to the right in the blue area where I've talked about training, coaching and learning and development. You need to empower your staff, to empower your customers. Therefore, what training and coaching and learning and development do your people need to deliver on this amazing customer experience that you want to achieve? And then to the left of customers engrave continuous improvement, leveraging feedback from both your customers and your people and the data that you're looking at. What are you doing around customer experience to continually improve it? So unfortunately, and this is going to be no surprise for you, customer experience, you can't tick a box and say it's done. Customer experience is constantly evolving. The world is changing. The market is changing. Your customers are changing and their behaviors are changing, and your competitors are always changing as well. So you need to have a mindset of continuous improvement and change management that supports that. And then around all of those areas I've mentioned is your customer channels, and I've got them in grey. But you've got to think about these customer channels and how do we deliver this fabulous customer experience across all of our channels, which links back to what I said earlier about it being a choreographed experience and a very considered experience. And this is what you need to think about. And that lends itself to the blue bubble in the top right corner around ownership. Who owns the customer experience? Who owns a process at a particular point? Who is accountable for that? So having really clear ownership of customer, the journey, the channel, and the processes. And at each part of the process, one area might not own one whole part of this process. There might be a handshake, which is when it goes from one area of an organization to another. So having really clear ownership and accountability. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, I have technology. Now, that blue bubble technology, have you noticed it's not in the center of the diagram? And what I see organizations make too many mistakes is they design a customer experience around technology and the capability of the technology, and then they throw shiny new toys, like I call it shiny ball syndrome, but they throw technology at trying to fix customer experience rather than understanding this whole ecosystem. So the technology should be an enabler and support the customer experience you're trying to achieve. And then to the bottom left-hand corner, we think about the operating model. What operating model is going to support your organization to deliver great CX? Not only today, but tomorrow. How is it going to change? If you think of, the future of our workforce, we're working very differently now. So we're doing business very different. So our operating model might look very different. Also, as we introduce channels, my main bugbear around introducing a new channel or a new technology is if you're going to introduce a new channel, you need to manage it. And part of managing it is the operating model that's going to support that channel. And then in the top left-hand corner, I talk about people. Now, you can't have great CX without great EX. And I have a whole chapter around employee experience and having a great employee experience within an organization to deliver great CX. So don't forget your people. Don't forget to take them on that journey with you. And also, when we talk about talent, I'm talking about recruitment, hiring, managing, training. Are you hiring the right people who are motivated to deliver on great CX? When we're doing recruitment, particularly in customer-facing roles, have conversations with clients around, you can teach people skills, but you can't teach them wills and motivation. And that links to that comment I made earlier around empathy. You can't fake it. So you've got to make sure that your people are genuinely motivated and on board to deliver great CX. And then surrounding it all, I'm going to start talking about what's in those lovely coloured arrows. Now, I've spoken to you before about the bottom left arrow in red, which is customer feedback. Customer feedback should be feeding into this ecosystem, and there should be a very structured program, like a voice of a customer program, where you're actually leveraging the feedback you've got available and you're making sure that you are factoring that in, as well as in the top left corner, I talk about reporting, and in the right corner in blue, dashboards. what reports and what dashboards, what levers are going to let you know that you're doing a great job in delivering great CX. And also that if you're making changes, you're actually going, right, we're going to introduce a new technology or we're going to change a process. How do you know you've done a really good job? Well, you need to make sure you're reporting on the right data, and that leads to my bottom right-hand arrow around actionable insights. So if you're having all this data is awesome. Unless you're going to do something with it, it's a waste of time and it's useless. So how are you converting your feedback, your reporting, your data into actionable insights that are linking into what I spoke about earlier with continuous improvement? And then around this whole ecosystem, you want to make sure your CX aligns to your corporate CX vision. And put it really simply, think about the customer experience you would have in a Safeway or a Coles compared to an Aldi, or compared to a food court in, say, Macy's or David Jones or Myer, wherever. What is their CX vision on delivering customer experience? It's going to be very different. Think about Apple's CX vision. That is very clear about what they want to do about delivering great CX. Now, you then think about that, then links to CX strategy, which is on the right-hand side of this slide deck. How does this all align to your CX strategy? Because it's similar to what I said about customer experience is no tick box. Your CX strategy needs to be constantly updated, monitored, measured, and improved, because this is a forever moving beast. So now I'd like to hand you over to Simon, who's going to talk about how you can assess your maturity model.
Thanks very much, Isabella. Look, I'd like to start with the premise that CX is a whole of business commitment. So we think about advancing CX inside an organisation, we need to take a whole of business lens. And one of the ways that we can do that is taking a maturity model lens to an organisation. Maturity model involves a deep dive into the organisation to do qualitative and quantitative analysis, and then from that being able to step back and look at the organisation holistically in alignment with the capabilities that support the customer experience journey and the employee experience journey. So if we look a little bit closer at the model here, we've got the CXMM elements. It starts with strategy, because strategy is the core of our alignment to the delivery of customer experience and to the delivery of the broader business objectives that are going to be supported by customer experience. We then look at employee experience, or the people inside the organisation, the processes, and the technology. And by taking these four lenses, we're not only able to look at customer experience from a customer journey map perspective or an NPS perspective, but we look at the organisation's ability to execute on customer experience. And when an organisation is looking to advance customer experience in particular areas, what that line of sight is between an initiative and the development of capability. So the way that data can be represented is in a 360-degree circumplex, which we can see on the right-hand side there, which allows us to firstly understand the baseline for the organisation. Where do we sit with regards to the capability in those different areas? And underneath that is a level of analysis that gives insight into, in that capability, what components are dependent on technology, what components are dependent on or driven by process maturity, and what can be aligned to the development of capability within the people inside the organisation. When you see that circumplex, it reflects where the organisation sits right now, but when you think about or when you plan to invest and develop in customer experience to shape the organisation for the future, you look at it in the lens of the products and services that you provide to the market, your customer segments. And from that, you can identify those capabilities and those areas that are most applicable to that customer segment, to those services and products. And from that, you can draw out a prioritisation around the areas of investment inside the organisation. You can then step back from that and looking holistically across the business, understand where you need to invest with regards to initiatives in developing people, initiatives in improving process, and the supporting technologies that are going to enable you to deliver business benefits. So those interdependencies will allow you to be really clear when you're articulating how do we get from where we are to the future state, and on that journey, what are the realistic business benefits that we're going to be able to deliver along the way, and how are those business benefits tied into the change inside the organisation. I'd like to talk through just a couple of examples, and we can see how the model has been used and how organisations are able to benefit from that use of the model. So this was an energy retailer. Now, the energy industry in Australia is probably the most competitive in the world, both on a customer and pricing perspective. So this organisation has a challenge to both drive out the cost inside the organisation, but at the same time to improve the customer experience, both of those being driven by the high level of competition. The organisation, in trying to do that, had a large number of projects and programs in flight, focusing on efficiency, technology change, process improvement, capability development, but all of those running in isolation. And the senior executive inside the organisation were really quite concerned that they hadn't been delivering on the benefits that they expected to see out of the programs, and that this large disparate program of work was not going to deliver, was going to continue to not deliver the benefits that they were looking to see inside the organisation. Taking a whole of business view, we're able to help the organisation understand, firstly, where they sat and some of the challenges that they are experiencing with regards to elements like change fatigue, elements like a misalignment between technology investment and technology strategy, a misalignment between customer experience strategy and customer channel initiatives. So stepping back and giving the organisation a clear understanding of the capabilities that they had existing inside the organisation from their technology platforms, the challenges that they had within their processes for fulfilment, and the capabilities that sat within their people that weren't being fully leveraged. We're then able to give them insights into the initiatives that they had in flight, and a line of sight from each one of those initiatives to developing a capability that was strategically prioritised as a step forward for the organisation. So out of the 400 initiatives, each one of them was ranked for alignment to customer experience, alignment to cost out, and a clear line of sight to business benefits that had supporting elements in place. So one of the challenges they had was, as Isabella talked about, shiny ball syndrome, the idea of implementing a piece of technology and that removing a problem from the organisation without recognising that to deliver the technology benefits, they needed to make operational changes, they needed to invest in their staff with respect to capabilities, and they needed to understand more from their customer about what the customer was expecting. So to be able to take customer context and then using technology to deliver it to a team member or a support officer inside the organisation that could actually assist in resolving those issues directly rather than being passed around the organisation. So the output of this was a baseline for the organisation, an agreed priority with regards to the areas of investment and capability inside the organisation, so back to that circumplex model, a current state and a future state that the organisation was driving for, a roadmap of initiatives that were in flight, a roadmap which included new initiatives to support the successful business benefit delivery, and a prioritisation matrix that any new initiatives coming into the organisation could be held up against to validate that A, it was going to advance the capabilities that had been identified as strategic priorities, and B, there was a clear understanding of the interdependencies on other streams and across the business to successfully delivering those business benefits. The second example was a great opportunity, really, to do a ground-up design of a customer experience from a contact centre perspective. So the initiative was to build out effectively an in-house BPO or outsourcer service for the New South Wales government. It was a greenfields opportunity. The service didn't exist. The government was looking to create a new front end for the members of the public to reach into government services, which would have a consistent experience, which would improve the effectiveness of the customers or the Australian, the New South Wales residents being able to access government services. Now, being a greenfields opportunity, there was a great opportunity to start with developing a CX strategy. So starting from the top, agreeing and bringing the organisation to clarity around what the CX strategy looked like, and then from that, going to a customer experience and employee experience centric design for the operating model, utilising state-of-the-art technology and really leveraging what were the basis of providing an outstanding customer experience for organisations which had historically provided a very low standard of customer experience and really not understood their customer demands, or had the metrics to improve their service. Putting all of those in place really sets a great framework for this new business processing outsourcing contact centre to kick off. Now, what did that mean? So what that meant was that we designed really the full service design, the technology platform, and then brought that in a very short time frame into fruition for the government. We launched on the hard date, day one, with all the functionality in place, and with the consistent CX-EX blends, we had all of the senior stakeholders really clear about what the objectives were and how they were impacting customer experience from day one. I'd like to pass over to Gord here.
Thanks, Simon, for taking us through those examples, and Bella for showing us your very comprehensive approach to customer experience. I have a couple of questions for you. I was reading a Temkin Group survey recently that was saying that just 23% of respondents claimed tangible benefits from CX investments. What are your thoughts on that statistic? And also, how can people avoid those pitfalls?
Hey, thanks, Good. Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I think 23% is realistic. It's certainly representative of the challenges that we see inside businesses, and there's only 3 or 4 real drivers that I see leading to, I suppose, that low success rate. One of them, one's a really simple one. We see projects that are branded as being CX projects because CX is a buzzword. CX has support of the executive, and that helps the project get across the line with regards to funding inside the organisation. But when you strip back and have a look at what the business case sits on, what the initiative is, there's no real alignment between the work that's being done and the customer experience outcome. So using CX as a buzzword to help business cases get across funding is a common challenge. And then, of course, looking for that benefit that's not going to be there. Second challenge I see is organisations haven't listened to the customer, and they don't really have a clear understanding about what good CX is for their customer. They've come up with an idea and they've run with it. And then when they implement it, they find that the customer, they've delivered something to the customer that they're not looking for or they don't want. The third one's probably cycling back to my earlier comment, which is customer experience is a whole of business commitment. And so projects or initiatives that are run in isolation, either in business units or between IT and business or in digital only, don't take into account the impact on whole of business, and they don't take into account that the success of the project, for any project, involves change management, involves communication, it involves alignment across the organisation, let's say with technology, people and process all coming together to deliver a change. And I think I talked about process. That's probably the fourth one, is that processes are not a customer journey. So changing processes as a CX initiative, which is a common one, doesn't take into account the customer's lens and the customer journey.
Of course, I agree with Simon. But in regards to avoiding a similar pitfall, I think we mentioned the ecosystem earlier, and that is really about putting the customer at the centre of everything you do. And actually, that is it. From the customer's perspective, what are you trying to achieve? And actually start it that way first. So what is that ideal, customer experience, that future state that you want to talk about? And then actually looking at what you need to do and invest in CX. The other thing is, and I spoke a little bit about customer journey maps and that concept of moments of truth. And, you've got to really think about what's really important to a customer might not be important to you. So not only ask them, understand them, looking at the data, because sometimes they're actually, and clients love this because they love that concept of low-hanging fruit or quick wins. Sometimes what's really important to a customer that could make or break a relationship is something that's quite simple to implement and not going to cost you a lot of money. So when I talk about CX investments, I see a lot of organisations buying new technology or implementing a new channel, but not actually thinking about how you implement that. I mentioned earlier about what operating model do you need? How are you going to report? Remember, it's this choreographed experience. So what's the impact on the other channels to create that seamless, consistent customer experience? So I think that organisations who fail don't think about it, number one, holistically, from that whole CX ecosystem, and secondly, as Simon said, they don't do it from a customer's perspective.
Thanks for that. And also, like what we're seeing right now is two big trends in business. On the business side, there's digital transformation that gets talked about a lot. And on the technology side, we hear a lot about the move to Agile and DevOps. Bella, what do you think the parallels between the two are, and do you think those two trends are complementary?
Yes, I think so. Let's talk a little bit about digital transformation. That is huge within organisations globally at the moment. But when we're transforming digital, we're not actually thinking about, the stresses or the changes it's going to have on other channels. So many organisations that we're working with, when we look at digital, their call volumes actually don't decrease, or they may, but their call handling times are increasing because they're far more complex. Or people are just using more channels to do the same thing, like customers are leveraging all of these different channels and sort of swapping a lot more. So, yeah, digital transformation is really important. But when you talk about on the business side, that is a big key. People are forgetting that it's on the business side. They're doing all this stuff with technology, but they're not communicating well to the business. And then moving to Agile. So if we talk about Agile, they keep on, organisations are making changes, using Agile methodologies, which is fabulous because we're becoming more Agile with a little a. But on the flip side of that, what is that doing to staff if you're adding new functionality, for example, on a mobile app? Are you going to communicate it to staff? Because are they going to find out from a customer who's then confused because they've gone onto their app and it doesn't look like it did yesterday? So we've just got to make sure that if we talk about Agile, we squeeze into the methodology concepts that Simon spoke about earlier, like change management and understanding processes. So what's going to change within the organisation when you develop things on a tech side using Agile? So, don't forget to plan around what it's going to happen, to communicate what's going to happen. So that's how I think. So, yeah, they are. You asked me the parallels I've spoken about, whether they are complementary. Yeah, definitely. They've got to be. Agile companies need to move Agile because if they're not moving fast, they're going to be left behind. You can't afford to wait 12 months to put out something new and exciting.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, Bella. I think that one of the challenges in DevOps is the concept of minimum viable product. And the minimum viable product from the lens of an internal DevOps team may not be a minimum viable product from a customer and a customer's experience lens. So when you think about minimum viable product and you're making regular releases into the digital space or into the customer journey, really understanding is the product or the change that you're releasing complete from a customer perspective with respect to their journey. And then as Bella talked about, that change needs to be clearly communicated inside the organisation. So the speed of change needs to be matched by an equal speed of transparency and communication and diligence around that change. The other thing that I want to touch on is that DevOps does give you the opportunity to test and learn. And so from a customer experience perspective, that's fantastic, the opportunity to be able to make small changes as a proof of concept, test and learn what that impact is and take away from that the insights to move forwards with your development cycle. So I think that is very much in hand with the digital transformation journey.
So there's one more thing I think about when we talk about Agile is, and this is sort of, where they can be really complementary, but sometimes it is a pitfall, and that is, organisations or digital sort of is really IT driven and not customer driven. And therefore, if they're doing releases in sprints and any of these releases are impacting people, whether they're your people or your customers, it may not be a logical change or flow from a customer's perspective to do things. So you might go, yeah, but it makes sense from a tech perspective because if we're integrating into this system, then we might as well do these three things all at once. But you've just got to step back and go from a customer's perspective, does that make sense if they are seeing it or if your staff are seeing it? So just be mindful about the human that's going to be impacted by this awesome transformation that you're doing agilely.
Thanks a lot, guys, for that. Before we move on to questions, I just want to share some statistics that we find really interesting at Cyara and how we address those statistics. There's this Bain survey that's been around for a while now, and that talks about how organizations see the service that they provide and they think they provide a superior service. And, 80% of organizations think that they provide good service. And yet when you survey their customers, only 8% of customers agree. And to us, what that says is, you talked about, having a baseline, not, across the whole organization. One of the things that we do with a platform is start with doing a baseline of the experience that you actually provide to your customers. And that can be across channels. And, starting with that, and then with the services that people like you provide, is being able to enhance that with the operating model and talking about the technology and how you use that and having that baseline, and then being able to also look at the consistency of the experience that you provide, and then being able to give those insights to the business and use that actually to set up your future state and actually have then a vision around the strategy and the roadmap that you're going to have to go from one to the other. And the second part of that is the platform that we have also is very good at sharing the experience that you're going to be designing and that you're going to be providing, and sharing that in a meaningful way. Very often we see IT departments or even business analysts sharing Visio diagrams or process diagrams, and they're even sometimes just parts of processes or parts of experiences, and it's very hard for the business then to actually understand that experience. And then, they agree to this, and then a big project goes along, and then once they actually realize at, the release time what that experience is going to be like, then they have to reassess, re-engineer, and then you see a lot of risk happening at that side of the project. So that's one of the things that we care about and we try to address through the platform. The second thing is, and you talked about, complaints and the fact that it's, something that we should really appreciate a customer taking time for. And it's like, we see that less and less customers actually take the time to tell us and give us feedback because there's survey fatigue and other things like that.
Yeah. The other thing is, you mentioned in your earlier slide about organisations, their perceptions, their reality, customers' perceptions is their reality. I reckon they're actually not so aligned, and it makes sense is because we're forgiving. We provide great CX given we're siloed and we don't have a huge tech spend because we just don't have enough money to invest in this and that. So I think we're more forgiving. And the other thing is that shows me that a lot of organisations don't actually understand their customers to think that they are providing a great CX. That linked to what you said earlier, Gautier, about, that they're not realising benefits on their CX investments because maybe they weren't the right investments and it wasn't important for customers. And then in regards to this, I noticed, you mentioned with your platform that it can actually look in the voice channel and measure CX. I think that's fabulous because not only don't customers voice complaints, you're tending to now hear from the really angry customers or the absolutely delighted customers. No one really in between anymore. No one can be bothered because you're asked for feedback all the time. So, and the other thing from a perspective and with your tool, it enables this. It's really hard for a customer because we're biased, we're humans, so there's a psychology element around it all. We can't accurately evaluate a segment of an experience. So if you said to me, how good was your IVR experience? My IVR experience would be biased by how good the person was at the end if I was finished self-serving or I didn't self-serve at all and I used the IVR to get through to someone. And if that was the right person who helped with my inquiry, I'm going to think your IVR is awesome. So I'm going to be at the really positive end of the scale. So, yeah, you need to have insights, data, metrics and ways of knowing, hey, it's really bad. So, for example, if I've got a bill and I'm keep on pressing billing or saying billing and I'm there 5 or 6 times within a week, you can look at the data to go, there's clearly a problem with my bill if I'm contacting you or chatting with you 5 or 6 times. So, when I get asked for feedback, I'm like, why don't you listen to my call history and my chat history? You'll know I'm pretty annoyed. Why even asking me? You're just annoying me even more now. So I think it's really important that you have tools such as Cyara's because we need to show customers that we know what's going on.
Exactly. Yes, right. And then just lastly around some of the stats that we've been looking at, as recently we had Frost & Sullivan run a survey with some of the executives at Fortune 500 companies and talking to them about what they thought the top impacting operational customer experience issues are. And top of the list came as poorly integrated systems. And that's one thing that we help to resolve is through automation and through being able to test, a lot of the different experiences that customers go through, is making sure that everything is integrated, that it be across your voice channel, but also other channels such as SMS, email, your website, making sure that everything actually provides a consistent experience.
That's that choreography stuff that we spoke about.
Here's the choreography, and I think you nail it with the consistency of experience. You need to be able to get the same information, and you need to be able to get the same level of customer experience as you move across channels. It's no good having a fantastic digital experience than having a terrible voice channel experience.
And that leads to one of the drivers of CX being consistency. You need to have better integrated systems to enable that consistency so you set your organisation up for success.
Yeah, and on consistency also, the second highest issue that those executives were talking to us about was actually poor load handling. And, if you can't consistently provide the same experience based on the time of the day, the volume of traffic that you're having is like, customers are going to know it and they're going to be annoyed by it. On par with that, also, customers were talking to us about, the cost of upgrades and the lack of funding. And there, we see that we can help also as we see very often customers telling us, we just want to add this little capability to our CX platform, and yet we have to upgrade our whole contact center solution, and it's cost prohibitive. Mm-hmm. And so being able to automate parts of those things and being able to actually do small changes very often means that cost and that of doing changes is reduced.
There's also Simon's advisory team often does a lot of engagements around business case development and actually getting it to stack up, because what I think is a big issue is people have these ideas, but the business case process isn't as robust as what it can be, because they're not CX experts like Simon's team are that can put together a business case that can show that ROI to get stuff done. So often having an external pair of eyes helps them get the case over the line, I suppose.
I think that probably ties back also to the large number of failed projects where they haven't delivered the benefits. And so, it is a more compelling argument that needs to be put forward and more due diligence around line of sight to benefits and realistic benefit realisation. Not saying the benefit will be delivered on day 1 or day 10, but understanding that it'll be delivered over time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the fourth biggest issues that we were told about was the silos between departments and business functions. And there, you talked about having a choreographed experience, and it's like what our platform does is it makes it very easy to actually share the experience and get people to actually see that and visualize and understand and live that experience before you actually implement it across the different departments and understanding the impacts to them, and then being able to use the platform to actually make sure that that's what you're implementing. Mm-hmm. And so that communication is a very large part of the platform also.
Definitely. And when we do our process mapping engagements and we map processes across organizations to look at automating, optimizing, eliminating processes, the biggest issues or the most time we need to spend is in that part of, a process where it swaps to a different functional department. We call it a handshake when we're talking about it, but usually that's when the wheels sort of fall off, and it's really important to give it that consideration. And that also links to that ecosystem I mentioned in ownership, that bubble that was in the top left corner, right corner. It's about having really, really clear ownership and accountability and working together, but also then understanding from a customer's perspective what that process means if it's broken. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So we just talked about, some of the issues that we're seeing and how the platform can help it. And it's like we have 3 pillars to the Cyara platform. We talked about design-driven assurance, and that's really around the discovery and the design of your future state, and then supporting that all the way through, making sure that your systems are integrated correctly, and that everybody gets a visibility on how you're tracking. Performance testing, we talked about load issues and consistency, and that also flows into the third pillar of the platform, which is around monitoring the consistency which you provide that experience. And it also helps tie back to, you were talking about having that line of sight and the return on the investments that you're making. And it's like, if you're making these investments and you can actually make sure that your platforms are performing accurately, then you're going to be able to make sure that, the investments or the results that you're seeing around your investments aren't impacted just because of poor platform performances.
Yeah, I think the production monitoring is really valuable when you're talking about a test and learn environment, whether it's through DevOps or whether it's just through a normal cycle of continuous improvement from a customer experience lens. If you are making a change and you can be sure that the results that you're seeing are linked to that change in capability or process, because the technology platform is consistent in its performance, then you can really draw insight and make a broader change in the business.
Thanks, guys. And now I'll hand back to Simone for a few questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Isabella, Simon, and Gautier. Now we've got time for one question, and this is from Stuart, and it's for Gautier. How do you get business owners to understand the importance of measuring CX in non-human channels, for example, the IVR, as you spoke about?
Well, it's quite simple. It's like, when you provide a self-service or self-care opportunity, and we talked about, ease of use and timeliness, is like, what's going to happen is that when that fails, is like you're going to have an increased degree of frustration from the customer, and they're still going to want their issue resolved. And so they're going to escalate to a higher cost channel, which is going to be people. And it's like, they're going to call you on the phone. Typically, they're going to be also frustrated because they're going to have to wait in queue. They're also going to have frustration with the agent. And that also has a flow-on effect on your agents and, their quality of life. And we see, contact centers also having to deal with churn because of the stress of things like that. So it's like, the impact of failure in self-service is really very, very, very great.
I think there's another lens that goes with that too, which is if you make your customer navigate through an IVR and through that you might make them identify themselves, or you take them through various channels to identify what it is that they're calling about, what the context is. If you go through that exercise or make your customer go through that exercise, you better use the information that you get out of it. So if somebody has identified themselves, you need to be able to take that context through to the agent. If they've selected options in the IVR, the agent can't start the call with, what are you calling about today? They need to know what the customer is calling about to take that context. So, yeah, I think it's really important that you've got a great line of sight between what you're making your customer do through the IVR, and then how that's actually making their journey easier if it goes through to a voice channel and an agent.
Yeah. So it's like, if you look at it, it's like, the cost of that failure is potential customer revenue, and it's also additional costs for the organization in terms of, people and also training.
Okay, thank you again for that, Gautier, and Simon as well, and Isabella. We all hope that you found today's presentation useful. Now, if you'd like to get in touch with Isabella or Simon from Exceed Global, their contact details are on screen. Finally, if you'd like more Cyara news, you can follow us on our social channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So please take a minute to do that. We also send regular product update emails and a customer newsletter, and you can subscribe to the Cyara blog. And that brings us to the end of the session. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us and listening in. As I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be making the recording available to you as soon as we can. So thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you again in another Cyara webinar.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.